In this video, I'm going to rank all of the episodes in the Dekalog series by Kieslowski. And I'm really ranking the episodes from two perspectives. Firstly, from the perspective of a layman, not a film scholar. And secondly, I'm ranking them on the basis of enjoyability, primarily. So I'm really letting you know which ones are the most fun to watch overall, as opposed to which one's the most poignant or ambitious or thought-provoking, because that might have been actually quite useful for me when I came to this series. It looked very daunting. It's a daunting prospect, these 10 movies all based around commandments. I'm not an expert in the commandments by any means. I just know that I enjoy the movies of Kieslowski, so that was my interest, but quite aware that I could get out of my depth very quickly. When I think of this series, it's very grey, it's not a colourful series, so I do have the general impression that this isn't a fun watch. It is a thought-provoking and poignant and ambitious and generally fantastic piece of work, but you do have to be in the right mindset to go in. It's not like a colourful piece of Japanese animation, for example, which are visual feasts that you can just look at and be delighted by. It's far more serious than that, with one episode that's a slight exception. And one final point before I start ranking the episodes. Even though it is very much set in a particular time and place, the movies are generally about characters in situations and ideas. So the location and the setting isn't relevant outside of how they have generally affected the characters. It's not as if you hear anything about Poland at that time. You really are kept to the lives of the characters and the issues and situations they're dealing with. And I guess that's why it can be enjoyed by anybody, because they are situations most people will encounter at some point in their lives, or at least understand. So on that note, I'm going to get into the list. And at number 10, I'm putting Dekalog 7. And something I did when I was coming up with a list is write a one-sentence description of the episode. So for this I put, a young woman effectively kidnaps her own daughter from her mother, who until this point they had been pretending was the young girl's real mother. And I think the reason I've put this at number 10, when I think of the experience I had when I was watching this film, outside of the issues, the young girl character is moaning at the very start of the episode, and she does it again later in the episode, and it's a noise that really grates. So even though it's a minor thing, that immediately puts me in a negative frame of mind when I think about the episode. And even though the issues are always serious, this feels like a particularly miserable episode. So although I was interested in finding out how the situation was going to resolve itself, I didn't find it enjoyable. I didn't find it an enjoyable film to watch. So that's why that's at number 10. Then number 9, I'll put number 3. At Christmas, a lonely woman drags an ex-lover around Warsaw on a wild goose chase. And one thing that really struck me when I was thinking back, although this was episode 3, so it was a while back when I watched it, I actually did watch the whole series in probably a week, so not that long ago. But I really found it hard to remember exactly what happened in the episode. So the fact that I had a hard time remembering the details, the real details of what happened, that's a negative. And as I was watching it, I wasn't hugely concerned about where it was going. I understood what was happening, but it wasn't the most compelling episode. So that's why I've put it in at number 9. Number 8, I've put episode 8. And my experience of this was coming off the back of number 7, which I've just put at the number 10 position. I found this episode quite slow. In fact, let me just check my description. A university teacher is asked to explain to a Holocaust survivor why she didn't help her as a 6-year-old and effectively condemned her to death. So the episode is essentially these two characters being reunited because the younger lady has actually looked up the older one to find out why she left her. That's the ethical issue of the episode. I did find it quite slow and plodding, and because it's off the back of this episode I had already not enjoyed that much. This was a point where I was concerned that the series was becoming a slog just because of these two episodes back to back. I don't think it was the most inspiring section of the series. So that was in there at number 8. Number 7, I've put Dekalog 4, which is a father and daughter get into confrontations over whether or not to read the letter the now deceased mother has left for her daughter. And this episode actually stars an actor that I really enjoyed in White. He wasn't the main character in White, but he was in there and I thought he was very good. So that was a nice hook. And it was a generally interesting episode that does keep you guessing as you go through it. And as I'm talking about it, I am quite aware now that most of these episodes, somebody's often died or somebody might be about to die. That frequently occurs, which adds to the generally depressive tone of the series overall. Whether or not you think that's a fair assessment, I don't know. And actually another point, I've mentioned that there was an actor that I've seen in another piece of Kieslowski's catalogue for being in White. That happens throughout this series as well. Characters reappear. You recognise actors from one episode reappearing in another. And in this case, reappearing from a completely different world. So that's why number 4 is going in at number 7. Number 6, I'm putting episode 2. A woman debates whether or not to kill her unborn child based on the likelihood of her husband, who is not the father, surviving his current illness. Which is actually a fairly interesting conundrum. The lady wants to work out whether or not her ill husband is actually going to die. If he survives, she's going to have the abortion. If he doesn't, she's not, so she goes to the doctor who's treating him to find out whether or not he thinks the guy's going to die. So that was a pretty good episode, and I should also say this, for some reason, in my mind, is where I started to notice all the smoking. There's a lot of smoking in this series. I really hate smoking, so I don't like to see this happening. I know it's from a different era, and I think Kieslowski himself smoked. But yeah, just a little side note, a lot of smoking. And then we move on to number 5, where I'm going to put Dekalog 9. An impotent man spies on his wife when she takes a young lover. And this was actually a very interesting episode, coming off the back of the two that I hadn't enjoyed too much. This one was engaging all the way through. This relationship between these two characters, whose relationship's in a little bit of trouble. So you're invited to see how the wife deals with the situation, well, how both characters deal with the situation. So that was a good episode. That's a good, solid, or representative entry from the catalogue. Then number 4, getting to the top end now, and I've put number 5, which I've written, is, I guess, the most famous episode. But how do I describe it? I said, an antisocial young man kills a taxi driver for no obvious reason and is hanged for his trouble. Now, that's not really a spoiler because it all happens very early on. It's not a surprise where it's going, really. And I do think this is probably the most famous episode because there are 2 episodes from this series, this being one, that was extended into a slightly longer, more full-length feature, which I've never seen. I've never seen either of these 2, and I've got no interest in seeing them because, to me, the episodes in this series are the definitive versions. So if they're extended for contractual reasons, that's fine, but I don't feel that move to watch it. And it would have been called a short film about killing. So this is all about capital punishment. You see the character commit the murder and then eventually get killed himself by the state. And the focus shifts halfway through from the murderer to the lawyer who defends him. As far as the series go, this is probably the most uncomfortable to watch, I guess. And I say I guess because you have to think about it from the time it was released. In modern times, it wouldn't be seen as shocking at all because you see worse every single day with your internet access. But I'm sure from the time the actual murder itself was considered quite a brutal scene. So that's in there, number 4. Then number 3, I've put episode 10. 2 brothers inherit a valuable stamp collection and misadventures ensue as they try to realise their gains. And this is the episode that has the lighter tone. So all the other ones are very serious. But this one does actually have a bit of humour about it. Black humour, obviously. And this is another episode that features an actor from White, which I mentioned earlier. And I enjoyed his performance in White. As I said, that's one of my favourite films from Kieslowski's catalogue that I've seen. I've only actually seen The 3 Colours, Double Life of Veronique and The Dekalog. But White always strikes me as the most accessible single piece of work. And I guess this one would be accessible too because of the lighter tone. Watching these 2 brothers try to manage their inheritance, it doesn't really go very well. It's all very entertaining and it's actually a nice way to round out the series. I think on that lighter note, I think that really helps the series actually. Number 2, I've put episode 1, in which a father and young son are very close until the son, off screen, falls through a frozen lake and dies. Yet another episode where a character dies, or death is very much at the heart of it. And that could kind of be a spoiler, I guess, and apologies if you think it's a spoiler, but the death isn't actually the climax. But the way I describe this episode really to myself is that it really is an excellent entry point to the series. It brings you straight in. I think it sets the mood very well. It shows you the location very well, and it's very snowy, so it's actually very cold. But this relationship between the father and the child works very well, and the whole idea is that they are characters of science, of statistics, of calculations, and they make a huge mistake, and I think that is the idea behind the episode actually. But putting all that to one side, it is actually a very easy episode to watch, and I think it was a good way in. So I think that was very well judged first episode. Because really, there's no particular reason why the episodes go in the order they do, I don't think. It's just a matter of flow. I assume it's just a matter of which order Kieslowski thinks they work best, and this one is a good choice for the first. So that's number 1, which leaves, I don't know if you've been counting backwards, but that leaves us with episode 6. The other episode that was extended out to a fuller feature, which would have been called A Short Film About Love, in which a shy young man attempts suicide after being embarrassed by the older lady who he has a crush on. You are introduced to this young guy, I guess he's about 18 or 19. I could have checked that, I don't know how old he really is, but certainly late teens. And he's spying on a lady who lives across the street from him. And he works at the local post office and he invents reasons to invite her in to the shop just so he can speak to her or have her in his presence. under false pretenses. She doesn't know at that point what's going on, but eventually they do meet up and it goes very badly for the lad. So the whole episode is watching this unravel, and you do feel quite sorry for the boy, even though his actions are very poorly judged and not to be commended. But I do think overall it's a very memorable episode, it's a very well performed episode. It's generally a very nice piece of work, and I think is a worthy number one. The standard is very high across the whole series, even if I've said that I don't hugely enjoy a couple of them for various reasons. They are uniformly excellent, but overall, in my estimation, A Short Film About Love is the number one. And I actually thought it was a shame when I was thinking back to the episodes, when I was trying to put them in order in my head without any assistance. A Short Film About Love and A Short Film About Killing, the fact that these episodes have got titles in my mind, even though they were created outside of the series, I think it's kind of a shame that they haven't all got a short title, because it would just help with the recall and give them a little bit more of an identity each as opposed to just a number. Obviously, I'm not Krzysztof Kieslowski and he knows better than I do, but that was just a thought I had, how helpful I found those titles. So that's my ranking list, that's my countdown of the best episodes. Hope you liked it, hope you found it useful, and maybe I'll be back one day with more videos.